Welcome to Marvel Vision, a podcast about Marvel, the MCU, and right now, Captain America, Brave New World. I'm Alex.
I'm brave as well as this movie is. I'm Justin.
And I'm new, and we are going to be talking full spoilers for the movie, which is out in theaters now. So if you haven't seen it or don't want to know, obviously listen to this later after you've watched the movie. But we're going to talk about our impressions, our viewing of it.
We're going to do our impressions of the movie.
Hey, I'm Captain America. No, that was way
I'm
off.
the villain who doesn't have a name.
Ooh, no, he's the hero. He's the hero, you know.
Yes.
Anyway, we're going to talk down the stuff, and just for a point of clarity here for anybody listening later, we are listening on Saturday after the movie's release on Friday. I only mention that because I'm sure we're going to be talking about box office receipts and stuff at some point, so we're kind of like right in the middle there in terms of how things go. But
these are the creative receipts that we're weighing in on, because yes. We've got them. We've got the receipts.
Oh, we do. Well, we're going to be, let's start it as you usually do here, and obviously you know this. I have a little bit of an agenda setting it up this way, but let's talk about how we saw the movie, what the reaction was in the theater. Justin,
let me go first because yours is too good to follow. I saw the movie on Friday afternoon, morning, 11 a.m. screening. Here in the city, pretty solid crowd. They were, I wouldn't say super engaged, and afterwards someone in the back was like, "Come on!" So I was like, okay.
Wait, I have a quick question. When did they say "come on"? Was it
after the movie ended, before the post credits? I feel like there's a time there where everyone can look at their phones and scream their reactions before you get to the post credits scene. So that's what happened. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely, I mean, this is jumping towards the end, but I was certainly surprised. Definitely when I saw it, same sort of thing. I feel like there was a reaction after the main credits. You expect a mid-credit scene. The fact that there's nothing, you're like, what?
Well, I mean, this is a sort of, the end thing to say, but like, it was straight. I was like, this should be mid-credits. Yeah. This is it. This is not, usually the end credits is where they do like a funny callback or something. Mm-hmm. Instead, the post-credits was not funny. It was not that serious also. So.
Right. Well, we'll get there in a second. I was just curious about that. Any other impressions?
I was glad that I had brought an urn of coffee with me because I almost fell asleep multiple times.
Oh, nice.
And I was guzzling it over the course of the movie.
Tipping your hand a little bit about the overall reaction
to
the
movie. Go ahead.
But at this point, through no fault of my own, I guess it is my own fault, but
It's definitely your fault. My fault. It's hard to blame anyone else.
Yeah, I know. But I've seen the movie twice so far.
The only person in America to have done so.
I know, and there's a part of me that's really worried. I haven't seen it with my daughter yet, who's pretty hyped to see it, and she's like, kind of wants to go today, so I'm like, I don't know that I can see Captain America Brave New World every 2 days for the rest of my life, but I saw it on
Man ushered out of theater with bleeding eyes from third screening of Captain America.
I went to see it Tuesday morning at a press screening, which honestly, like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, beautiful. Love that. Like
Tuesday
nice
morning
middle
film.
of the day, drop my son off at school, headed to the city, go see a screening, come back to pick him up. Perfect timing there. Love that. Yeah. Weird thing that I will say about the press screening that really annoyed me, there was somebody near me on their phone the entire time, which is rude behavior anyway, but to do that at a press screening, gross. Really gross.
Is there any policing of that at press screenings?
There used to be.
I feel like the press screenings I've gone to, or like union or advanced screenings, I would be terrified to get my phone out because it's a smaller theater.
This happened for, I think, Deadpool and Wolverine as well, where like, I don't know, I don't want to read too much into it, but I do think this points to the sliding importance of Marvel movies, I say on our Marvel podcast. But yeah, they used to be like, you go in, they lock up your phone. They take it, they put it in a plastic bag. You have to wait on a long line afterwards. Deadpool and Wolverine was the first one I went to where they were like, no, go in, don't worry about it. And there were people on their phones during the movie there too. Same thing with this one, just went in. Everybody was just kind of doing whatever. There was a guy walking back and forth the entire time with his little flashlight. Didn't do anything about the guy on his phone on the row. It was very weird. But anyway, that was the first time I saw it, and we'll talk reactions afterwards. But like, It was fine. It was a press screening. People don't react too much. The second time I saw it was Thursday night. I took my son to go see a Tide collateral stains screening of the movie, which probably requires a little bit of explanation.
Yeah, that's a term that I don't know if the general populace is like,
No?
oh,
Really?
you saw the collateral stain? Sick.
Yeah, I know what that means. No explanation necessary, bro. Tide has a campaign right now where they're saying that in the MCU, if you live in the MCU, rather than collateral damage, you get collateral stains. So
Yes.
they have this whole ad campaign through various movies. I think there's one like Battle of New York. I'm forgetting the guy who does the film review show, who was the Baskin Robbins boss in the Ant-Man movies. He's a comedian. He's very funny. I don't know, whatever. They have a thing where like he spills his drink on him because he gets scared about something that happens in one of the Ant-Man movies, I believe. But like the main one is like Red Hulk crashes down in Washington, D.C., and a bunch of people at a bus stop get sprayed down with dirt. And then those people are like, God, what do you do when this happens? Like, you got to use Tide. That's the whole idea. That's the whole thing. So,
Makes sense.
yeah, the collateral stain screaming in the briefest way possible is they set up a screening for the movie. We were sitting there. It was like just folding chairs. They had set up a theater in this space that was like a multi-use space. Had a very nice screen. It was very nice broadcast, good sound, so that's cool. But they had a bunch of pipes everywhere, all over. And they told us before the movie, first they showed off the trailers for Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, which is pretty cool. I hadn't seen them on the big screen yet, so that was fun. And then they had a message being like, hey, anytime the Tide orange danger lights flash, which they showed us what that meant, which is basically like these rotating lights that were orange, the same color as Tide, you know you're going to get messy. And then also they said, keep your phones out so you can get your reaction, which I was like, oh, any other time this would make me Red Hulk out. But you know what? I've seen the movie before. I get it. This is like, you're trying to get people gross. I'm just going to kind of go with it and have a good time. And I'll tell you what, first of all, my two main reactions. One, probably the wrong movie to do this for because it's a very talky movie.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fights where mud would come.
Exactly. So like there was at least an hour 15 of the movie or something where nothing happened other than when they did the mind control thing, they would flash strobe lights to time out with that, which I was like, okay, this is cool.
That's
but
cool.
Also I feel like I'm going to black out when this is happening. They also had some very nice things, like right at the beginning of the movie when Ross, not the inauguration, but when he gives his acceptance speech, they dropped confetti in the theater, which was like, cool. Oh, that's cool. That's fun. And then at the end, when he reverse Red Hulk's, when he unred Hulks or whatever you want to call it, and the cherry blossoms are falling.
They call it Fords. When he Fords.
Yes, he Fords out. When he reveals his old man body, they dropped a bunch of cherry blossoms as well, which again, I was like, oh, this is very pretty. Very nice.
Think of the trees they killed for that.
Oh my God, it was terrifying.
Worth it.
They also, I forgot about this. They dropped a bunch of like leaves when they were fighting in the forest, and I was like, well, that's weird. All right, I don't know how many leaves are falling during this fight, but all right, cool. But the big things that happened was at the end of the Celestial Island scene, they sprayed us with water when Sam landed in the water, which was fun. And I was like, okay, not too dirty. Oh, they also gave us face shields to wear the entire time. But the big thing was the entire Red Hulk fight. They sprayed us down with mud the entire time.
That's awesome.
It was so disgusting, but it was very fun. My son, who was terrified of the whole thing, was like covered in a towel the entire time. Very smart. Probably not what they wanted from Tide because the whole idea was like you get your clothes cleaned with Tide. But I got disgusting, like in my hair, on my clothes, everything.
And what was the mud? It was like a dark brown, pretty goopy.
Yeah, it was like, I was trying to figure it out. It's probably like topsoil, like the sort of thing you get at like
nice
a garden
soil.
store. Yeah.
So but it's also very dark and rich. I feel like
100%.
So it's like just blasting out like in big spurts and then little spurts.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was honestly, yes, very, very fun. I had a really good time. It's great watching it that sort of way with everybody like screaming every time that it happens. And yeah, we'll talk about general reactions to the movie, but I had a very good time doing that. And that's my story about the Collateral Stains screening.
That's awesome. I saw a Collateral Stains for Conclave, and that shit
Oh
got
my,
crazy.
oh, that's nuts. They're just shooting popes all over you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anytime they mentioned Jesus, I just got blasted with some mud blood.
They blast you with blood, but it turns into wine or reverse.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I opened my mouth and drank it down. It took a while. It was like I was getting half blood until, he turned it.
Yeah,
So
he's
it's
got to
like
transmute it.
full on blood. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to check
Iron.
out those Tide transmutation screenings.
Really good stuff.
All right.
Blessed.
So that's how we saw it, but let's.
That's what we recommend. That's what we recommend.
I do. They're never going to do that again, but, just like take your own mud to the screening of Captain America and throw it. Nobody's going to mind. Nobody's going to stop.
Sir, what are those 5 buckets for? You'll see.
You got your oxypods or whatever, right, man? Cool.
Yeah. I'm promoting my car wash I'm just opening, so I'm going to blast everyone with dirt during this screening of Thunderbolts asterisk.
So yes, thank you to Tide for having me at that. Very fun. But let's talk about the movie. Obviously, there's been like a lot of negative critical reaction to it, and I'm sure we have a lot of stuff we want to get into here.
Sure.
But as we usually do, let's talk overall reaction to the movie, and then maybe start off with positives, things that we liked about it before we start to get into everything else. So, what was your overreaction, Justin?
Now, my overreaction?
Your overreaction.
What was my overreaction? My hair's on fire! That's my overreaction. But my regular reaction is, I had said during the Super Bowl when we got all the trailers, I was like, guys, what if they're all good? Mm-hmm. Meaning all the Marvel movies coming this year, because I was very hype. The most recent trailers for this movie I thought were actually pretty excellent. And now I'm here to say, guys, what if they're all not good?
Oh, no.
No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I will say, to keep it positive first, I really think, Anthony Mackie's in a tough spot with these movies because he...
To keep it positive, things are looking bad for Anthony Mackie.
Just wait. Because he has to do them. They're huge movies, starring vehicles. But there's the Marvel machine is in a strange place with what they think movies are supposed to do, I think. But I will say, when he finally had a little bit of air on this movie, which unfortunately was the end, it was really nice. The last scene between that he had when Danny Ramirez was in the hospital, I thought was like, oh my God, they're actually having a conversation and they were being funny. Like, I really liked that. And I was like, that's the guy that I think we want to see. And it's nice to see, even though it was at the end, that he's in there. Like, we saw a little bit in the Captain America Winter Soldier series, where we got to really know Anthony Mackie's Sam when he was like down with his family. And it felt like there were some ideas behind him that were really cool. And I got to say, I like the way we get to see him fight. Like, we've seen Steve Rogers, and it's awesome. Like, just like, bare knuckle, throwing the shield, getting knocked around, but he's tough enough because of the super soldier serum. With Sam's cap, like, we see it's not that way, but he's much more tactical. And the aerial stuff in the movie, I really liked. I thought the dogfight stuff was cool. I liked the jumping back and forth between Cap and Falcon, I thought was great. Like, and then you see when Falcon goes down, like, Sam's reaction is great. Like, so there's a lot of good in that stuff. And I will say, I did like the Red Hulk CGI. I thought he was really, like, they captured Harrison Ford in a way I was like, oh, that's really well done. And I liked that fight, how it was a Hulk that had focused rage as opposed to just general rage. Because the way they've done Hulk in so many of these movies is he's just like a scared dog, just like smashing everything. And this one, he was mad and sad. And I think that showed in the animation. And I really liked that they sort of had that be the choice there. So that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah, generally speaking, I came out of that first screening being like, well, that wasn't a disaster at least, but found my reaction souring over the course of the day, the more that I thought about things. And obviously, like I said, I had fun in this seeing it the second time, but I don't think it changed a lot of my opinions of the movie. But I agree, to keep it positive again, with a lot of what you're saying there. Anthony Mackie's great. Like, he is really
Yeah.
good for the role. He's a really engaging performer. One of his talents that I do think is shown off, particularly in that final scene with him and Danny Ramirez, is he is really focused on his scene partners, and that's something
Yeah.
that you can't underrate. Like, he just gives them everything. Like, he's just tossing the ball in that direction, and
Yeah.
that's really nice to see. And that's also kind of what you want to see from a Captain America as well. I think that's important because that's a character that you want to support and lift up everybody around them.
And especially Sam's Cap, because he's different. Like, the Steve Rogers Cap is like just the consummate leader, and who's just like, but knows what's happening, knows what to do. He's like, I'll take this on. I can handle this. And Sam's a little bit more like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Okay, oh, you did that. Okay, and he's much more of a reactive Cap, and I think that's cool. And I think they let some of those ideas into the character and into the story, because I also think there is a good story underneath this movie of like, if we hadn't known that Red Hulk, that Harrison Ford was going to be Red Hulk, that would have been an unbelievable reveal. That would have been very exciting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way that movies are made, they had to spill that, or they thought they had to spill that.
Well, I mean, I think that points to a lack of confidence in the movie in general,
Yeah.
that they put front-loaded it with the final reveal of the movie, because they're like, we can't sell it on Captain America, Anthony Mackie, we got to sell it on Red Hulk and Harrison Ford, and that's how they flipped it. Whether that's accurate or not, I think that's certainly what we can take away from the marketing. But I agree with you. I mean, the fact that, like, he has an origin as a VA counselor. That's how we first met him in Winter Soldier. They follow that through really nicely. And personally, I like heroes who are trying to de-escalate situations, and that's constantly what he's trying to do. He's approaching it as talk first, action second, when that doesn't work.
And that becomes his final victory, which I was like, great. I thought that was a really nice idea. And honestly, like, to expand it out even larger, the idea of this movie being built around sort of three characters. Thunderbolt Ross, sort of very powerful, obsessed with power, gets the presidency, and then has to seek this next level of power with Red Hulk to stay alive and all of that, holding on to power, and then that power overwhelms him. That's a cool metaphor for the Hulk, and to put it in the political stage, interesting. Then you got Sam Wilson, a soldier who's been elevated to a position that he doesn't feel like he's earned, and he has to rise up in that moment. Interesting. Especially in relation to earned power versus unearned power and how that goes. Those two characters together, really cool. Then you had Isaiah Bradley, someone who had power forced upon him, something he didn't want, was crushed by the system, finally establishing himself, and he gets crushed again by the system. Forced into power and then rendered powerless. That's an awesome trifecta of ideas, and they just cannot take advantage of it. Like, they laid it on the table, and like then they over-explained it in parts, under-explained it in every other part, and just I'm slipping into negative now, made a mess of those ideas.
Yeah.
A sort of tide level needed cleanup on this mess.
That was the other person I wanted to shout out, though, which way over everything else was easily, in my estimation, the best part of the movie was Carl Lumley as Isaiah Bradley. He was also probably the best part of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the TV series, as well. Just like every single scene, he puts his heart on the table and everything.
Just the shot of him when he's in solitary after he's like, I can't go to solitary.
Yeah.
It's just a blade of sun is hitting him, and he's just giving so much emotion. It's so upsetting.
Yeah.
And then in just literally that one shot, he's not even moving.
Yeah. I thought the best scene of the movie, I hear you on that last scene, but at that point I was like, what are we doing here at the end of the movie?
I meant more that was the most human
Sure.
for Sam. And I was like, it's crediting Anthony Mackie with having that.
For sure. But I think the scene in the prison when it's Sam and Isaiah talking, and Isaiah is saying, like you're saying, I can't go back to solitary. I can't die in here. But then he turns it around and is like, I can't do this to you.
Yeah.
And the implication,
Really?
that was the moment, like, both times I saw it, I was like, oh, twinge in my heart. Oh, this is
Yeah.
so sad. Because that, to me, gets to the heart of what the movie could have been about if they hadn't taken Isaiah and been like, well, he's off somewhere in prison. Don't worry about him too much. We'll bring him up every 20 minutes or so, but we just don't see him.
Yeah.
Is the idea that I guess they probably don't want to touch because they don't actually want to be too political is the idea of what the system and what the government does, particularly to black men, which they dealt with a little more heavily, particularly in the Isaiah Bradley episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier. But here they kind of throw the ball to the audience and they're like, yeah, you figure it out. You go
Well,
with it. You know what we're talking about. Don't worry about it.
and it's especially bad in that the Isaiah Bradley story in the comics was a revelation, just a tragic thing that gave sort of this, we have the bright, shiny origin of Captain America, and to have this be like, actually, it was much worse than that, exploitive, and something that, America has done and does all the time, where there's the bright, shiny side and the other underside that got us to that point. And so it's an intense story. And then when they wove it into the TV series, I was like, oh, cool, risky. And here, when they sort of just like almost, name check it, and then they're like, don't think about it, because this movie's fun. Don't think too hard about how horrifying this idea is.
Yeah.
And I just feel like they had the chance to let it resonate with the Hulk as the counterpoint to it, and have Sam be the one that has to humanize the face of both sides of this, both sides of America. Like, they had on their hands a perfect American metaphor, power metaphor, and superhero metaphor, incorporating the race into it too, which I'm sure they were scared of it, which is like you're saying about Isaiah Bradley. They did not want to touch that. But when you include these characters, it's there. And if you ignore it, it's at your peril, because it leaves us being a little just disjointed from this movie, because it's on our mind. We're watching it. We're seeing the story.
And just to bounce off of this here, because just for clarity for anybody who's listening, I put up a review on our website, and I also put up a post on Blue Sky. And both times when I was like, this movie doesn't connect to any of these themes in any way, people are like, why does everything need to be about Trump? And I'm like, no, I'm not saying it needs to be about Trump. Certainly, I guess that's a way they can go. But the point here is there's institutional racism that's been present throughout the entire history of the United States. And we get little glimpses of it in the movie, like the Isaiah Bradley scene, like the quick moment where Harrison Ford calls Anthony Mackie's son. Yeah, which they stay on for a moment, but they don't do anything with it. And throwing things out there and being like, it's paying it lip service at best is what they're doing here. When could they have done something harsher or harder or more pointed with their themes? Probably not, given it's Disney and Marvel, and they don't want to do that. They want to do a popcorn movie that's going to appeal to the entire world. But exactly like you're saying, my general impression coming out of it is, why do this movie at all then? Why have Sam Wilson as Captain America fighting the President of the United States? Why have a guy crucial to the plot who was tortured for 30 years by the United States government, and then his whole thing just being like, why did I shoot the president? Who's to say? It was a guy with a broccoli head.
A light flashed in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Also, you're calling this movie Brave New World. You're that's an inherently, satirical book that you're name checking there. Something that is undercutting a corrupt society. It's like, guys, you're doing all the thing. And that makes me think also, maybe there's a version of this script that was that scene where he's where Harrison Ford calls him son and he is reacting on the way up the door. I'm like, there's more to that scene. I bet there's more of that in this movie, but just not in this cut. So that's what we're left for. And moving off this real quick to talk about one other thing I liked. There was a scene with Sam Stearns, the leader, who is never called the leader. He just has a broccoli brain. And there's a lot of very bad scenes around him. But the one scene, and it references a comic book run, where he has a song about Blue. He's called Mr. Blue in this moment, from this soldier that we have to talk about in a second.
Yeah.
And he shows up, and it's this very upsetting death of this soldier. And it felt like, oh, here's a villain that I'm into. for a second in this movie. Is the leader undercover, like affecting these different characters from a distance, manipulating them to having this big confrontation. And we just never got any more of that interesting evil vibe that I think was in that scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that I want to say about that portion of it. But I agree with you. I like that scene between him and Dumphy, which, as you mentioned, this is Sam's best friend, who I did not realize until we were talking about it in the Comic Book Club Discord. That's Dennis Dumphy, who is D-Man, the homeless man who dresses as Daredevil and fights crime.
Well, let's just say, like, there will be no D-Man in the Marvel universe because I believe he becomes D-Man later in life. Technically, it's not like he was D-Man living on the streets and then he got into the military.
Right.
So D-Man undercut in the Marvel universe. But I got to say that whoever that actor is, I don't know his name off the top of my head, he did a great job. When he died, I was maybe the saddest in the entire movie in that movie.
He was, so again, too many thoughts going around in my head about this, but just this is a broad thing that maybe we can come back to later. One of the other things that bothered me about the movie is that it very specifically called to mind other, not just other movies, but like other Marvel movies. Like we had the fight with Ruth Batsaroff in the hallway that was clearly filmed exactly like the Black Widow fight in Iron Man 2. But the rough outline of the plot of this movie is almost beat for beat Winter Soldier, down to Dunphy being the stand-in for Frank Grillo's Crossbones. I'm forgetting what the actual human name of the character is. But so I expected like, oh, we'll see a turn from him. But nope, he was just like a nice, supportive guy. So when he died, I agree with you. It was a real bummer. But the capper of that scene, again, this is, I think, where you could feel the script machinations coming through. Tim Blake Nelson at the end being like, don't you know I'm the... And if any word other than leader came out of his mouth, it's stupid. And when he says, I'm the hero, I'm like, what? How does that tie into literally anything that's happening?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Also, that's some, like, no one buys that. Like, there's no way he thinks he's the hero. His whole thing is having a big brain. He's not deluded into thinking he's the hero. Right. He's literally trying to make good on a freedom plea deal he got from being evil. Like, he's not under any auspice that he's saving the world. He knows he's just trying to scumbag out of jail by fucking with everybody. So I was like, just doesn't work.
And
so, like,
also, sorry, can I just say one thing more? Just real bummed out about Tim Blake Nelson here, because this was an aspect of the movie I was actually really looking forward to. I love him as an actor. He's great. If you want to watch very specifically a better superhero performance from him, go watch Watchmen on HBO. But he was really good and fun in The Incredible Hulk. And so having that tease of the blood falling in his head and him turning into the leader all the way back then, I was like, okay, cool, let's do this. I love the character from the comics. This will be fun. And for him to have standing so stiff, being like, I'm gonna talk about numbers. I know probabilities, and that's all I do. Bummer. Real big bummer.
Well, and I think across the board, we can call this movie an actor ruiner because everyone was just mute. I like almost all of these actors in this movie, and they were all just so muted in this, like from all the way top to bottom. Like Falcon.
I'll call out Danny Ramirez. You were just bringing him up. I love him. He's
very likable. He's incredibly likable, even in this movie where he's saying very dumb lines.
I wanted to talk to you about this specifically because every single one of his jokes falls flat. Like literally every single one.
He's like he's doing bits. And they're all very bad.
Why don't they work? Because again, like he's a very charming actor. He's very engaging. I want to like him in the film, but there's something about every single one of his lines. And I expected this for the press screening, but then like watching it at the Tide screening, nobody laughed at anything.
Well, to me, it was because everything felt canned. It felt like someone doing like a Top Gun impression, doing like a stage reading of Top Gun, being like, right, boys, or whatever. Like, it just felt so inauthentic. And that's why I mean, like, that last scene, I feel like worked a little bit and there was some humor in it because it felt finally grounded and authentic, like two people talking to each other. In the first third of the movie, they're just like, doing cliche after cliche, and the characters are not settled in any way. They're just like, bro, we crushed that. Baba, all positive. No, like humor, I think, needs to be pushing on something, and everything is just like soft and frictionless. So like that's why nothing hit to me.
Yeah, and that's a real bummer. I'll call out one other scene that I do think was human that worked, although I didn't. This points to another issue I have with the movie, is the scene in the limo with Isaiah
Oh yeah.
and Joaquin and Sam, where they're on their way to the White House. That honestly just felt like an improv scene that they were doing
Yeah.
because that was straight up. That wasn't even Sam Wilson. That was Anthony Mackie in that
Yeah.
scene. But them ribbing Isaiah Bradley and being like, "Where'd you get that suit? Where'd you pull that
Yeah.
out from?" And then being like, "We're on the way to the White House." Hey, very fun.
It was fun. That shoot scene was shot very weirdly, so maybe it was just improvised. Because
Yeah.
it was. You see Isaiah, and he's in one like tiny corner of the shot,
Yeah.
and then you see his reflection behind him. I was like, "What's happening here?" Just confusing visually, and
This
maybe it
was-
was just a camera that was left on while they were
Yeah.
doing bits.
I mean, this is what I wanted to bring up about this is one of the big problems with the way that I had with the way the movie was shot across the board is it's almost entirely in medium shots, which you can
Yeah.
see in that scene. Like there is no wide shot of the three of them sitting in the limo, so you can establish like you don't need to establish what a limo looks like, but like you're saying, it looked like three different limos where they're never in the same place at the same time.
Oh, I have an answer to that. Why that is? I
Ooh,
think
go ahead.
so much of this movie was done in pieces. It feels like just looking at it from the way it's shot and just the amount of green screen or volume stuff that was shot. That's why all those shots are medium because you have. You want flexibility to move stuff around. So you leave the actors you want in the middle so that in post you can make adjustments. And I think it's just a bad way of shooting because it looks boring. And it's like at the end of Fablemans when he's like, it's interesting when the horizon's the top or the bottom. In the middle, boring. And that's what, just dead center, it's like a poorly framed photograph. And you hear so many lines where you're hearing the line on the back of another performer because it's ADR. It's added in post because they're cleaning up all these plot changes they made throughout this. Because a little bit of backstory, someone we haven't talked about, but Giancarlo Esposito's part as Sidewinder was never in the first script or first time they shot this movie. They added that. That's why you see when Sam goes to meet him when he's in jail, he's like, "Hey guys, you wait out here. We're shooting this a year later. So I'm going to go in and talk to him separately." And you see all of those shots are ugly. There's that scene when Sam meets the leader right before he's going to fight Hulk. And it almost looks like they AI'd Tim Blake Nelson's mouth on
That was crazy.
because it was medium wide with Tim Blake Nelson like in way back away from the camera.
It was also, I noticed this the second time through, he's fuzzier than the rest of the shot.
I think maybe they pulled him from another shot and placed him in a different background, but it looks so bad. And it's because they were like, okay, how can we fix this? And here's my overall take on the Marvel method right now. They sit down, they're like, let's make a hamburger. And normally you'd make a hamburger by starting with a bun, meat, tomato, ketchup. They're like, let's make a hamburger. We're going to start with chili. Let's turn this into a hamburger. And they're like, first we'll strain the beef out. Then we got to uncook it and then recook it. Tomatoes. Okay, take all the tomato paste and push it together and just squish it until it's a tomato. Bread, how about we just do beans instead of bread? And it's like, here's your hamburger. And it's like, what? This is chili, you fucks.
That's a very good metaphor. I mean, two things that I wanted to mention, or actually, I guess one scene. Oh, I do remember the two scenes. First one, the Celestial fight, I thought was great, but also my reaction to that was like, this is a different movie. This felt like straight up a different director.
Top Gun. Yeah, it felt like Top Gun.
And that, to me, I could be wrong about this, but we know that Marvel and other big budget productions work on pre-visualization months, years before. Like, those action scenes are set. So it feels like, to your point about making the hamburger, they were like, great, got to tie up this Celestial thing from Eternals, bring that back. One guy has been tweeting about it a whole bunch, like, why don't they talk about it? So we got to answer that one guy. Here it is. We set up the whole action scene. So that was like, again, so different from every other shot, every other feel of the movie. It just felt like it opened up, and when you have the bars open up in IMAX or something.
Yes,
like that,
exactly.
that's what it was.
And it
And it
was
was
much
good.
like to your point. It was very dynamic and successful. I thought the camera was moving all around them as they were
Yeah.
flying. Like it was really cool. It was
It was also, it contained the one fun moment in the movie,
yeah,
Sam riding on the missile, which
yeah.
that was the thing that I was like, ha! And that was the one moment that brought me joy watching this Marvel movie.
I have two more joy moments to keep it, throw some positivity in
Sure,
here right
sure.
there. It's crazy, and I was talking to a friend of the show, John Gabers, about this, and he's like, it's crazy to think about how the first run of all the Marvel movies, and we were like, Bucky, he's sort of lame. Sebastian Stan, fine. And then when he pops on the screen in this movie, it's like, oh my God, a movie star's here. Oh my God, this man is shining. That scene is like, it's still stilted and weird, but it's nice to see him. And that's a strange thing because he, for a long time, was sort of like, oh, he's in the background somewhere. And then I will shout out the line I liked is when he's going to fight Hulk and he's like, fucking Bucky said, don't take the serum.
Yes.
Kill him for the serum right now. I was like, that's a great little line right there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Those were both really good. I have more to say about the Bucky thing if we want to come back to it later. But just to
Definitely.
mention the other scene that I think, like, actually, there's two more things now that I'm thinking about that are like straight up reshoots. But the one that bothered me so much was the scene of Ross talking to Betty in the Oval Office
Oh,
for so many reasons.
yeah.
Not least of which, clearly shot at an entirely different time. Betty, her lines, like, I'll mention, I reached out to Disney about this for a piece I was doing for IGN because that and her appearance at the end, I was like, was she even there? Like, was
Yeah.
Liv Tyler in the movie? And according to Disney, yes, that is her doing the voice. It's not like Respeecher app or anything like that. And she was, in fact, on set for the scene with Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford towards the end of the movie. So there's something else going on there. But that scene was so bad.
So it was just weird. It was
There were so
unsettling.
many pauses in the scene as they were talking. The way that her voice came through crackly, the first time I saw it, I was like, is this the leader pretending to be her to
Yeah.
trick him? Because it also completes his emotional arc. His emotional
Yeah.
arc over the course of the movie is like, why won't Betty talk to me? I got to be good enough for Betty. And the fact that she gets on the phone and is like, I'd love to see you, Dad. His emotional arc is done, so it makes no sense with anything that comes after that. Second time through, because I was like really trying to listen to what she was saying, mainly to like fact check my piece and make sure I was right about this. But I'm pretty convinced, and I have no backing on this, but I'm pretty convinced there was a scene in some cut of the movie where Liv Tyler does in fact show up during the cherry blossom fight to be like, Dad, you have to stop. Because all of the dialogue she has in that scene fits with Ross has just been beaten, turned back from the Red Hulk, and her being like, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were attacked. Him saying we should take a walk on the cherry blossoms and her being nice. And maybe that's even like him dying or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Because she says,
Interesting.
bye, Dad.
Yeah.
All of that dialogue fits somewhere else, and then they have Harrison Ford talking around it. So very, very weird. It was also just generally speaking weird to be like, Liv Tyler's back.
Yeah.
Because-
Well, and maybe that's something we should talk about, like the creative missteps. The first of which is like, why are they doing a sequel to The Incredible Hulk and The Eternals? Two movies that we as fans have put away. We're not, no one, they're answering questions no one has. And I think that there's some sort of broken brain idea that this is a good thing to do. Because I don't think you have to do any of this and you can still have the Red Hulk. You can just still do whatever. You could have the leader be at a distance doing that.
Well, I think the big problem with these things is they don't. It's like getting a bunch of different puzzle pieces from a bunch of different puzzles that just don't fit together. Like all the Incredible Hulk stuff, and I'm far from the first person to point this out, do not belong in a Captain America movie. Like a Captain
Yeah.
America movie should not be a direct sequel to 2008's The Incredible Hulk. And if you want to do something about the leader versus Thunderbolt Ross, that's fine. But this gets to my big overall problem with the movie is Sam Wilson has the least character arc of anybody in the movie.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you have a scene where it pops up, like him talking to Bucky, or at the end with Danny Ramirez, where it's like, really hard living up to the expectations of Captain America. But literally any other scene in the movie, he's fine at it and pretty good at it.
And he does live up. He saves the day. He lives pretty easily. Lives up to the
He
expectation.
saves the day. Everybody likes him. They start off the movie where a newscaster is like the two leaders of our nation, the president and Captain America.
It's like,
So everybody likes him. It's good.
yeah,
Like we're all good here. There's no character journey for him to go on. So instead, all of the character journey is on Thaddeus Ross, a character who's played by, and mind you, like William Hurt passed away, so they needed to recast the part, I guess, but like it's played by an actor who has never previously played the role, interacting with somebody we need to remember from 2008. That
yeah,
just doesn't work. Similarly with the Eternals thing, like, sure, you could do something with Celestial Island, and that's fine, but the only reason it's there is as a set piece that looks cool. And this is another thing that just doesn't tie into the movie at all. Like Adamantium, right? We haven't mentioned that
yes.
yet.
I was gonna say that next. Yeah,
Sure, it's a MacGuffin, but they keep talking about like adamantium. It's the best metal. Everybody wants it. Why? How does that tie into the plot of the movie? And more importantly, how does that tie into Sam Wilson Captain America's journey? Particularly because they spend a lot of time talking about how cool his vibranium suit is. If
yeah.
adamantium is stronger than vibranium, why doesn't that come into play at literally any point in the movie whatsoever? Like, we do not need an entire movie, like you were saying, to be like, oh, you remember the Celestial? Here you go. It still exists. It's made out of adamantium. Later on, this is the origin of Wolverine's bones. Like, that is not, again, a good plot for a Captain America movie about Sam Wilson.
Yeah, and like if they want to do that as a little thing for the fans, fine. But like they don't do that. Like I was not dying for it, but I just assumed we were going to get a scene like the Canadian government has volunteered to be an arbiter on the adamantium fight to hold the medal as a safe third party, and I was like, nice. Setting up X-Men. Instead, it was just nothing. Because it ended up being something that was just an empty thing to say.
Well, and also, I mean, while we're criticizing this specific plot point, they talk a lot about how an isolationist nation, meaning Wakanda, has their medal. Now we have an even better medal, and the entire world has it. That is much more directly on a Black Panther movie and what's going on with them, and setting up stuff for the future rather than, again, anything that deals with the emotional journey of Captain America Sam Wilson.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to affect him in any way. And it could have, and maybe there was a version of the script that did. One other thing I mentioned earlier, there was another thing that just bothered me with the reshoots, and this is maybe my actual number one thing that I was like, yes, you shot this movie a million times. We haven't talked about Shira Haas as Ruth Bat-Saraf too much yet.
Yes, there's a ton to talk about here.
Yeah, and people probably know this, but she originally was a Israeli superhero named Sabra who has superpowers. They're going to make her a mutant in the movie, potentially, or at least that was a rumor to tie into X-Men stuff and the mutant stuff that they're slowly building up in the background. As you may be aware, there's some world events happening in Israel, and people got very upset about the inclusion of Sabra. So they smoothed it out. So she is Ruth Bat-Saraf, former Black Widow, and they speed past the word Israel so quickly.
So fast.
So fast.
Israel.
They're like,
Israel.
Don't even mention it. But there is one scene where she shows up in a superhero outfit.
I know.
Nobody responds to it. It doesn't play into the movie anyway, and it disappears immediately after that.
So strange. First off, the idea of including Sabra in this, it all feels like a strange choice. Like, why Sabra's identity as a superhero is Israeli, like hardcore Israeli, and like that's cool in the comics. But I can't imagine Marvel wanting to ever do that, given politics. So unless it was some kind of like promotion, like where it was a paid for choice by like who knows how the machinations of that would go. But man, was that a big mistake just across the board.
Yeah, and also it's a bummer because Shira Haas again is a good performer who gets nothing to do in this movie other than that one hallway fight, and really only seems to be in the movie to give us potentially the same sort of dynamic as Winter Soldier, where you have Captain America, a Falcon, and a Black Widow, but they never gel into any sort of team. She disappears for good chunks of the movie and shows up incongruously, and honestly doesn't seem to have much of a rapport with Anthony Mackie and Danny Ramirez at any point. So certainly a bummer. I guess maybe we'll see her more, but I don't know.
I doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Another one that doesn't see that is very weird in the movie, I think, is maybe I'm mispronouncing her name, but Josha Rockmore, who plays the Secret Service agent working for President Ross,
Yes.
which is almost like the opposite thing of like, ooh, who's she? Just a Secret Service agent?
Yeah,
Sounds
regular.
good.
Well, and I was also like, was she going to be a love interest for Sam? Was she going to be like, it felt like there was an idea here, but like, man, do they just knock it off.
Yeah. And it's similar to like the whole Serpent Society thing, which again seems to be like, here, this is for the fans. You guys like the Serpent Society, right? Except we're not going to give them any serpent theming or snake
No
costume,
snake.
nothing.
Yeah.
It's just he's a guy who throws knives. And that's pretty much
And like, honestly, that fight, the sort of junkyard fight, I thought was cool. Giancarlo Esposito is good, especially at doing this, being like a sort of reckless villain. He's done it exclusively in his career, basically. And I like, he's one of the actors that sort of is so set that he does pop a little bit in this movie, but you can tell it's just all plot grafted on here for no good reason, except they're like, hey, we talk a lot in this movie. Sam needs to have 2 fights in the first third. Then surely they cut something else of another fight or something. And so they just have these fights and then tie it in with like, well, the buyer was, and it's like, the government? What?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really talked about the overall plot here, but there's not much of it. Like, again, they're trying
And
to
yet
ape.
also too much.
Yes, they're trying to ape the beats of Winter Soldier down to the like, we got to head out of town to an underground bunker where a villain that you forgot about from a previous movie shows up. And then we're going to have a fight scene out of here as it gets attacked and whatever. And it's just, I don't know, the whole thing, it feels like a copy of a copy the entire time, because this is not necessarily a criticism of Winter Soldier, but they talked about how like, this is a 70s thriller, like the Parallax View or whatever the name of the movie is.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's using some of the tropes and ideas there to make what is, I think, arguably the best MCU movie in Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
But this is copying not Parallax View, but the Winter Soldier. So it's like a copy of a copy is what we're getting here. And it just, I don't know, you can't just be like paranoid thriller, period. You need to actually create something tying back to what we're talking about with the politics that ties into some sort of real world thing, because there's nothing that we learn about the characters or learn about the government or learn about any of this through that paranoia other than Ross bad, tortures on him. And again, maybe there was a version of the script where like they drove home the Guantanamo parallels or something maybe a little harder, and then they softened out the edges. But in the finished result, you don't get any of that there.
Well, and like, because I do think like the power dynamic I was talking about earlier, like, is really interesting and could have been enough story engine to do all of that.
Yeah.
And especially the idea that a malignant force pushed Isaiah Bradley through brainwashing to do this. That's cool. But that part is sort of ignored after a while once we find out it's the leader. His motivations make no sense. He was secretly working for Ross, and then he's mad at him for not letting him go. He gets out easily and then just wants revenge for no reason. Like, that's not a very broccoli-brained thing to do.
He kills people in a house who we've never met before, and then all of his plans fall apart immediately, so he's not even really that good at figuring out the odds or anything like that.
Doesn't make sense. The Serpent Society stuff doesn't make any sense. Why do they want the Rock? Japan, the international plot doesn't make sense, and only raises empty stakes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, World War could happen. I'm like, aren't we dealing with other stuff here? And then the funniest, I laughed out loud in the movie, like, after it's averted, the Japanese prime minister's like, he's so emotional, and he's like, and I was like, what? What are we doing?
You were doing this. You were all into this.
You were doing it, and this is a character we don't know anything about at all.
Yeah.
And then the Red Hulk plot doesn't make sense. At one point, he's like, I hate Captain America. I was like, why? You don't have any reason to hate him. You're a friend.
The leader, you mean, right? The leader. Oh, no. Ross hated Captain America?
Ross, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. His arc also, like you're saying, didn't make sense, but also the leader being like, gotta get rid of Captain America. I was like,
Yeah.
why? I don't know.
He's barely affected you.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to be involved at all until you force him to be involved.
Yeah. Do you go and turn yourself in for no reason? Well, I was like, why did he do that? There's no reason he had to turn himself in.
Also, that was, as somebody who works as a journalist, I was very impressed how quickly everybody turned around those interviews with Sam Stearns.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the other thing is like when Ross turns into the Red Hulk and they sort of blame the media for asking too many pointed questions. I was like, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah, I don't know. None of it. Again, like we said earlier, it seems like they're pointing to a bunch of stuff and being like, angry president. You remember that, right? And I'm like, yeah, but you're not actually saying anything about any of these things. You're just doing it so that there is a Red Hulk. You're doing it so that there is a fight in Washington, D.C. with cherry blossoms, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a lot of things on that note where people have information about stuff that I don't think they actually have, like with the Bucky scene where Anthony Mackie turns, it was like, I almost had Stearns. And Bucky knows what he's talking about, despite not being involved in the movie at any point.
In the story.
Or when Anthony Mackie is like, remember when you used to walk through the cherry blossoms with Betty? A thing that we previously found out through Betty's conversation with Ross, but there's no reason for Sam Wilson to know that whatsoever.
And the pro cherry blossom in this movie, I was like, what? Did cherries buy this movie? Yeah. Because like the fight at the end, I was like, this is crazy. And then we push cherry blossoms so much. Yeah. Also, from what we know about the Betty character, she wasn't walking with her dad through the cherry blossoms from the Incredible Hulk movie at any point.
That never happened.
But just before we move off of the Bucky stuff, the way I don't know, is this a setup for Thunderbolts where he's like, yep, that's Representative Bucky Barnes working in the Congress? I was like, what? Also, I was like, he got elected after being an international criminal his entire career.
So I'll tell you to spoil a second article that I did for IGN. I actually talked to my local congressman's office about Bucky
that's really funny.
Running, which I'm excited. That should be running today or tomorrow as we're taping. But yeah, according to them, like the biggest issue is not any like the age or anything like that. It's the fact that he murdered American citizens on American soil might be a little bit of a problem with him having a congressional run.
That famously, that was the plot of the Captain America movies that came out. He had to hide in Wakanda for years.
I know.
Because he killed people. And he's like, now I'm representing Delaware's third or whatever. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And then also Shira Haas comes in and like appraises him like a horse, which was very weird. Like good teeth, great posture, could run 60.
Yeah. I was like, but I was also like, why? Why are we doing this? Does he have to be in Congress in Thunderbolts? Because I would think no. I can't imagine that's a part of Thunderbolt.
I don't know. In the trailers, he seems to be in Washington, D.C. with Valentina, whatever Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character's name is. It's very long, and I can't remember it.
Yes.
And maybe that, or something.
But why, if she's putting together a team of crack secret operatives, why is Bucky in Congress one of them?
I don't know. Crazy. Just overall, it just weirdly tips the MCU towards, and they're all running for office or whatever. Like Captain America works directly for the president. Bucky is in Congress. Spider-Man works for his local comptroller, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good to promote civic responsibility from people, but I'm not quite sure why we're doing this.
Well, and like just to zoom out and look at the larger thing, because we got to talk about the post credits. Like that's such an example of every Marvel thing becoming the middle, and like I think that's the idea of comic books, and that's what they sort of wanted. Like everyone's going to keep coming to these movies because it's all ongoing, it's all the next story. Mm-hmm. But they've unfortunately sunken into the opposite problem, where everything feels like a mushy middle of like, wait, what is that exactly? And nothing feels self-contained and sort of crisp in its own thing. Because we forget that the success of the early movies was that they were great stories that also happened to connect to a larger story. Mm-hmm. And they flipped it. Now it's like, all middle that connects, it pays off and connects to other things, but there's no actual crisp story edges that make this movie like, oh, sick. Here's what that movie was about. This movie, what is this movie about?
I don't know.
It's a mess.
Big cherry blossom, I think we've
Yes.
established. I mean, that's direct contrast. I know I brought it up before, but direct contrast to Winter Soldier, where it was about Captain America is now in the modern world. He came from World War II, clear in his mind, right and wrong, good versus evil. And he's now in a world of gray, and he doesn't know how to deal with that. And by the end of the movie, it's like, nope, good versus evil. Here we go.
Yeah.
I have simplified the world. And so there is that character arc there, but also in terms of the MCU of it all, it has these big events of like, Shield is destroyed by the end there, and that is one of the things that I think is so shocking about that movie. Is you have this thing that's built up for the first couple of movies, that middle you're talking about, but they ultimately are like, this is all about Shield and his relationship to Shield, and we end that. You know, and then we move on to the next thing for the rest. But here, like, Sam's big thing is character arc. If you could point to one, it's like he's told, "I want you to restart the Avengers," and he's like, "I don't know about that."
I'll tell you what, that's the way the audience felt as well. I was like, he's going to restart the Avengers? He's not even sure he should be holding the shield.
Right.
What's happening?
And then his arc at the end is like, I guess I will restart the Avengers.
It's like, wow, back to one.
Yeah, great. And that, I don't know, that's not like a big move because it doesn't work for an audience because we like the Avengers and we want to see the Avengers and we want to see a team together. But like doing an entire movie teasing that out, unless you end with him being like, and here's who's on the team and here we go and they're all here together, it's not any sort of resolution. It's also not much of a conflict because we know that it's coming. Like, and I know that's an outside story, but nobody has Odie like, nah, never gonna have the Avengers again. Not gonna happen.
Exactly. That's the inherent flaw with this idea of like him debating for one fucking second that he's gonna maybe restart the Avengers. Like, we know someone is, and we sort of know you're gonna be on it unless your movie tanks.
Right.
But let's talk about the post-credit sequence.
Yes.
Because I was just indicative of the rest of the movie and the whole MCU, where I was like, here's a poorly shot scene where characters who really aren't involved in this are saying almost nothing about what's coming down the line.
Yeah, so Broccoli Head has worked the numbers and realized that they're in a multiverse and figured out that
that drove me crazy. I was like, you work the numbers and you know there are multiversal incursions coming? Not real. In the most nonsense world of nonsense, that is fake. And I was like, I believe so much shit. And I can't believe you can't even land one of those planes for me to be like, yes, that is interesting.
Yes, old Broccoli Head who works the numbers tells Captain America, who has no superpowers, that multiversal incursions are coming to mind you, and he's like, your team, who you do not have yet because you just decided to restart the Avengers, is going to stop it. Like, that tells me nothing. Like, I know they're trying to set it up. It feels like so much course correction. And this gets to the greater, like, most negative thought I have that ties directly back to the thing you said at the beginning of the podcast. But this, to me, is really the movie that I went from... Back in the day, I've said this a million times on the podcast, but I always felt like you go into an MCU movie and you're like, it's C+ or better. And C+ I don't think is bad. It's like, yeah, it's solid. It's a serviceable effort. It's fine. But most of the time, it's better than that. You know, it's going to be a good time at the movie theater. We've had a couple of years where we're like, I don't know what's going on with the MCU. There's some good stuff. There's some bad stuff. We'll see what happens. This is the one that turned to, you got to start proving it to me. Because, like, I'm looking forward to Thunderbolts. It's a fun cast. I want it to work. I hope Fantastic Four works as well. Fourth time they've tried it. But I'm definitely in a mode of, I don't know about this, man. And tying back to this post-credit scene, I was really struck by, like, you're going from Captain America with no team, skipping past Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, and teeing up a two-part Avengers movie that you've paid, what, $90 million to Robert Downey Jr. to play Doctor Doom in, where you're going to kill this multiverse that has been barely set up over several movies and TV shows over the past couple of years. Like, how am I supposed to look forward to that? Like, I know this is a very, like, whiny fan complaint that I'm giving here at the end, but I'm not. Like, there's nothing to
Yeah.
tease up here about, like, sure, tie up your universe. And if Thunderbolts is just okay, if Fantastic Four is just okay, I legitimately think those two Avengers movies will probably, they'll do fine because they're Avengers movies, but that'll probably be basically it for the MCU at that point.
Well, I don't know. They have a chance to reset. Like, I'm curious to hear what the numbers are going to do for this movie. I bet it does pretty well. I think it's going to do better than a lot of the other ones recently. So they don't care too much about what we're saying right now on our podcast.
100%.
They care about if people are coming into the theater. And so, like, if it does well, they're going to feel pretty good. And I gotta think, unless they're absolute psychopaths, that this feels like the last movie where they were still going under the old method of, like, we'll throw the chili on the conference room table and we'll make a hamburger out of it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is what the last time they did that, just schedule wise. And Thunderbolts feels like they were using the old model of introducing the characters, but I think they maybe took the time to write a script for this.
Maybe. I sure hope so.
Well, and definitely Fantastic Four, I think they did do that for sure.
I sure hope so. I again, we like this stuff. We're obviously on a Marvel podcast, and I want this to work. It's just seeing Brave New World, and I do think a lot of the audience is going to take this away as well. They're going to tune out. Like, even if Thunderbolts is good, even if Fantastic Four is good, I don't think it's going to necessarily be like, oh, we're so back, baby, back to the glory days of the MCU. They have to be awesome to win people back, and then every subsequent thing needs to be awesome. We also have a lot of TV shows this year. This, to me, even more than the troubling past couple of years, is a off-ramp for people for the MCU.
Yeah,
but
it could be.
We'll see. I mean, in terms of the box office, just to talk about it, like, it's very early, but I think that they're looking at like 80 to 90 million for the weekend. Granted, this is talking about just like Thursday, Friday, which is it's not disastrous.
Yeah,
it's lower than like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but a lot of it, I think, is going to depend on legs more than anything, as well as the worldwide box office. So we'll see.
I bet this does better worldwide, but I think the legs are going to fall off this one.
100%.
I just don't think it's such a, like, cold metal, like, sound effect of a movie where you walk out being like, like wincing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the way people are going to take it. But I do think worldwide, I don't know, this does feel like classic MCU in a lot of ways, and that might hit internationally.
Well, and I do think also all of the things that we're saying that we wanted out of the movie, whittling out any sense of actual politics or anything like that, sending it worldwide, it does not make it about like American exceptionalism or anything. Yeah. It's about the president screwing up and turning into a Red Hulk. And internationally, people might be like, cool, sounds good to me.
Well, and let's remember, you pay for the movie when you come in, not on your way out. So, and the last trailers were good for this. Like, and yes, the reviews are really showing its truth, but I don't know. I think I was excited to see it, and I know what's going on.
Yeah. So we'll see. Obviously, we're very focused on the outside of it. Before we wrap up here, any final notes? Any other things that you wanted to bring up?
I think we hit all of it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I had to say. Cherry blossoms.
Tied. Let's go to our vision board then, because Captain America will return at the end of the movie. Obviously, again, we know Bucky is going straight into Thunderbolts, so we know that's going to happen, and we're going to see more of him running for Congress and being on the campaign trail and fundraising and things like that. That's going to be great. We're going to love that. But what about the rest of these characters? Where do you think they'll pop up next? Where do you want to see them next?
I think all of these characters are iced. I don't think we see any of these. I think this will end up being sort of a broken stick, to use a hockey term, of a movie where everyone except for Cap and Joaquin are probably going away. I bet Joaquin comes back. I just don't think we want to see the leader anymore. We're not going to pay these actors to show up in these movies to do a small bit part, I don't think. I don't think we see Red Hulk again. Mm-hmm. Because Red Hulk maybe we see the Red Hulk, but I don't know if we see Harrison Ford again.
Yeah, I could see the Russos wanting to use him for some sort of climactic battle scene in
Yeah.
Secret Wars or something like that. So for sure, they already got the model, so they could just throw it out there.
Well,
But
and it's a great punchline of like, there's the whole rainbow of Hulks from the
mhm.
multiverse or something
Lovely.
fun.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love a different colored Hulk. That'll be pretty
Yeah.
exciting. And yeah, I agree with you. I think we're going to see Sam Wilson again. We'll probably see Joaquin again because there is that clear setup of Falcon joining the Avengers. And again, he's a good presence. I wish he was better
Yeah.
in the
Like him.
movie.
And he'll be better, I think, because the character bones are there. It's just it wasn't working
Yeah.
with the script. But he can be a Spider-Man type, you know?
For sure. So I think the next time we're going to see them, though, is Avengers Doomsday, where Sam is putting together his Avengers team. We're also going to see the Thunderbolts there, we know, and the Fantastic Four is going to be there. So that's going to be the whole incursion plot line. He may already have a team together or something like that. We'll see. And then we'll probably see them in Secret Wars as well. But yeah, I don't think we'll see them anytime before then, unless there's like a Thunderbolts post-credits scene or something.
I mean, I bet we could see Sam in that
Yeah.
post-credit scene being like, well, you guys barely pulled that off. Who wants to join the Avengers or
Yeah.
whatever?
And that's good. Just to
Yeah.
sort of like leave on a positive note, my big takeaway, my big positive takeaway for this movie is Anthony Mackie as Captain America good. They have now put him in two very bad projects, including the TV show, that have been like stymied by a bunch of reshoots and a bunch of bad things. And I just like, I want to see him again, and I want to
Yeah.
see him in a good project. So we'll see what happens.
Here's hoping. I'm still positive about Thunderbolts. The trailer that aired right before this movie
Great.
was good to see in the theater, like fun. I think it's going to be fun. I've been fooled almost exclusively.
Well, here, I mean, not to talk too much about Thunderbolts, but again, having also watched the trailer right before, versus this one, that one seems to have like such a clear across the board theme to it. You have a bunch of depressed superheroes who are like, we shouldn't be superheroes, fighting a guy, the Sentry slash the Void, who has dissociative identity disorder, who's like, no, I am a superhero. That's what I am. Like, that's such a clear contrast. And if they could really bring that home and make that work like they do over the course of the 2-minute trailer, I think it might work as a movie.
Well, and plus, just story-wise, they're in the trailer, they're like, all we have are punches and guns, all of us. And the idea that they're going to take on the most powerful superhero slash villain in the Marvel Universe is exciting because they're going to need to find a way to win, and I don't know what that is.
Yes.
I've read these stories, but I still don't know how they're going to do it. And that idea, that means they don't have to do a bunch of plot tricks. They can just be like, how are they going to do this? And that's the clean, simple story we need.
And then the other thing to contrast it, and just to sort of wrap up my thoughts here, like almost every joke in the Thunderbolts trailer actually hits. Like they're actually funny performers saying funny things that work. There's like one or two clunkers in there, but if they can make that work across the movie and just have a bunch of funny people riffing on each other, could be a good time.
Could be Marvel. Could be a good time.
I don't know. Oh, hooray. Well, if you'd like to support this podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/comic book club, where you can get ad-free versions of this podcast and all the podcasts we do, Apple, Spotify, Android, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show, comicbookclublive.com, for this podcast and many more. Until next time, stay marvelous.
Stay marvelous and take your super podcaster serum so we can actually win this fight.